Hi everybody, Lisa Waldron here, Senior Advisor at the Westpac Foundation. As Rob mentioned, also on the line to help answer questions at the end of this is Sally McGeoch, our other Senior Advisor. Together we run the Westpac Foundation Social Scale Up Grant. Really pleased that so many of you could attend today to listen to today's webinar. Hopefully you'll get lots of insights about the grant program. Okay, so we'll get started. So just going to run through quickly what we're going to cover today. I'm going to give you an overview of the Westpac Foundation and the Social Scale Up Grant, give you some understanding about the application process, the eligibility, and also give you the information about all the selection criteria that we'll use to shortlist and select the recipients. Obviously, there's going to be some tips for a strong grant submission, and the all-important key stages and key dates and the deadlines when you have to get everything in by. And then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So we'd really like this to be interactive. And as Rob said as we're going, feel free to pop in your questions as we go, and then we'll get to them at the end. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a little bit about Westpac Foundation. It does have a very long history. It actually goes back to 1879, but don't worry, this is not going to be a history lesson. I'm going to just give you a quick overview of the Westpac Foundation in its modern day form since 1999. And basically we exist to actually provide grants and non-financial support to not-for-profit organisations based in Australia and social enterprises that are giving opportunities to Australians who actually need it the most. In our modern day form, since 1999, we've granted over $34 million to almost 600 not-for-profit organisations. And interestingly, since 2006, we've provided about $16 million to support social enterprises. So our commitment to social enterprises and this social scale-up grant does go back over 10 years. And it's really the reason why we're here today to talk to you all about the Social Scale-Up Grant. Okay, this Social Scale-Up Grant, which I'm about to talk to you about, really just want to put it into perspective because it's just one of the range of opportunities that are available through the Westpac Group. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later at the end of this presentation, but I just wanted to put into perspective, that's why we're going to go into so much detail just specifically about this grant. As you may already know, the grant is actually designed to help not-for-profit social enterprises that are primarily focused on creating jobs and employment pathways for those who face significant barriers of entering into the workforce. And often these people are long-term unemployed or actually currently unemployable. And the Social Scale-Up Grant helps the social enterprises give more people a real job in a real business. Okay, we've funded 10 social scale-up grantees over the past 2 years. And as a group, those 10 organisations, social enterprises, are out now actually over the next 3 years aiming to support more than 2,000 Australians who are actually currently unemployed into jobs. An additional 2,000 people will also, through these 10 social enterprises, will also access really valuable formal qualifications and work experience. In addition to that, they're also aiming to boost their annual income from trade by around $70 million during that time. And they're planning to take their percentage of revenue from trade from 88% to over 100%. You can't go over 100%, but up to 100% during that time as well, on average. So as you can see, our approach is to provide the grants, the more than money support, which I've just started to outline, and I'll go into a bit more detail about in a moment, and obviously to help our social enterprises scale up to provide more jobs for people who need it the most. We do this really in partnership with and creating long-term partnerships with our 10 organisations. We want to foster really deep long-term partnerships with our grantees to ensure your future sustainability. We also want to help you build the internal capacity of your organisation and really, give you a blend of financial and non-financial support. So we're very lucky, and the way we do that is because we have this amazing skills and expertise in the Westpac Group from our employees right across every domain in the group, really wanting to volunteer their time and energy and support our social sector partners for the benefit of our grantees. We call that our Changemakers program. It used to be called our More Than Money program, and I will give you a few examples of that in a moment. So on to a little bit more information about the Social Scale-Up Grant. So our grant is actually awarded, as I said, to growing social enterprises that have a proven model. So that growing and proven model is really important, as well as that the primary purpose of your social enterprise is to create employment pathways for vulnerable Australians. However, saying that, at the same time, we expect that the proven model is that you've got a proven commercial model that is generating income and that will be sustainable in the longer term. In terms of who we target through these grants, I guess, one way that we describe it at the Westpac Foundation is that we know that most Australians have a really good quality of life. They have access to education, training, employment, and most Australians have access to friends and family that they can rely on during difficult times. But we all know that everyone on the line here today knows this, that actually not all Australians are actually afforded that same opportunities. And the Westpac Foundation wants to target people who are not offered those opportunities. And so we aim to support our target groups in Indigenous Australians, people from refugee, asylum seeker backgrounds, young people at risk, women who are at risk, people who have experienced homelessness and family and domestic violence. They may have mental health issues, as well as people living with a disability. And just to quote a line from our annual report, through every grant we award, every community organisation we support, and every social entrepreneur whose vision we believe in, we're helping to build a nation where no one is left behind. And that's really what this Social Scale-Up Grant is about. We want to support 5 organisations this year, as we have done in the past 2 years. And the financial contribution that we'll be able to make for 5 organisations is $300,000 each, together with that non-financial support through our Westpac Changemakers program. And that can include business mentoring to help improve the sustainability and impact of your organisation, or it can actually include a whole range of support. We currently have a HR, marketing, digital and a legal panel, whereby we have a whole range of our employees who come together to provide support for our community partners. And that could be advice, it could be pro bono, it could be accessing our learning platforms, it could be attending leadership programs over a period of time. But we do have a range of all of that non-financial support that we can offer as well through the Social Scale-Up Grant. Okay, these are the 5 organisations that we selected in 2017. We've got Soft Landings, Career Seekers, Mirror Vanguard, Laundry Services and Good Cycles in Victoria. These are 5 fantastic proven commercial models for creating, but also ideally also first and foremost, they are creating jobs and pathways for Australians, as I mentioned before, who are long-term unemployed or currently unemployable. We have some really beautiful videos on each of these 5 organisations, plus a combined video on our website. I'd really encourage you to watch these videos to really get a sense of the organisations that we're looking to support. As I mentioned, all amazing commercial models, but the reason why they exist is because they create jobs. And I suggest if you're struggling with this sort of tension about creating employment versus really creating profit in your social enterprise, and you're really putting the profit before the jobs, and you might be creating a few jobs as a result, but the jobs are not your primary reason in your social enterprise, then you probably won't make a strong application. These organisations are putting jobs first and job pathways first, as well as having this strong commercial model. Also, interestingly enough, all these organisations we have supported through our previous grant programs. As I mentioned, we've been supporting social enterprise for 10 years. Some of these organisations got some of our early seed funding and startup funding. Some of them got a $10,000 community grant. And I guess that helped to have a small relationship with them prior to applying as well, so that we really understood their model. They've all got very diverse models. And all of them are really keen and are tapping into already all of that more than money support that I just sort of mentioned before as well. So they're all, lots of them are taking advantage of that as well. I will just briefly put up our 2016 recipients here. So we have Jigsaw, Bread and Butter, Green Connect, Farmer Services and Street. And I guess what you can probably see from these 10 organisations is that we've really taken a portfolio approach to selecting them. You can see that we've chosen a variety of organisations across really different geographies that are targeting diverse target groups and that are creating different impacts. Some are creating deep pathways and employing people within their social enterprise, and others are creating pathways outside and jobs outside of their social enterprise with deep connection and partnerships to mainstream employers as well through their programs. So you can see, we're trying to get a diverse range and select a diverse range of organisations through this grant program. So there's more information on those people on our website. Now, from the stories to the logistics, here we have a diagram that represents the application process. As some of you have already done, thank you very much for taking the Social Scale Up Self-Assessment Survey. It's the new element to the grant process this year. Really, it's a very tightly contested grant program, and we want organisations that are really going to make a strong application to apply. So I'll talk a little bit more about the self-assessment survey in a moment, but it is the first step in the process. Applications are open now. Just with the self-assessment process, anyone can take that at any time of the year. So it's open all year round. Applications are open now from the 1st of Feb to the 5th of March, and we will close off those on Monday, close of business on the 5th of March. We will then shortlist by the end of March. Everyone who applied will be advised if they've been shortlisted, and I'm going to go through that criteria shortly in this webinar. So you'll be advised at the end of March whether you've been shortlisted, and those that are shortlisted will then be asked. You'll notice that the application is a shorter application because we'll be asking you, if you're shortlisted, to then submit your business plan, to then submit all of the supporting documentation and financials that you've summarised in your application. And for those that are shortlisted, that will be due on the 10th of May. From that point, we then have the really difficult process of actually selecting the finalists to go and visit and have some site visits. And from the finalist stage, we then recommend to our board, and our board will meet in September to make and confirm the actual 5 grant recipients that will be funded in September, and the funding will then flow from there. So as I said, I'll just touch a little bit on the self-assessment stage. We want those of you to apply that are recommended to apply. The self-assessment has 4 types of questions. It has your eligibility, it has the number of jobs that you're going to be creating over now and in the next 3 years. It also asks for your financials now, and also your projected financials in the next 3 years. And then ask a couple of questions around your operations. So if you can answer yes to all the self-assessment questions, then you're going to get an answer at the end of it that says we recommend that you proceed with the application. If you answer no to any of the eligibility questions, then we recommend that you are not eligible to apply. So those eligibility questions are really hard and fast, and there's no room for movement in those. If you've got the jobs, then once we move on to the jobs, financials and operations, if you do answer no, then it's highly unlikely that you will make a strong application at this stage. So we want you to really look at that. You will get a PDF of your self-assessment, and you can go back and look at where you've selected no and where in those jobs, financials and operations, if there's only one no, and it might be a little bit grey, maybe best to give us a call. But if there's a couple of no's in there, it may mean that you're just probably at the early stage. I mean, remember those 10 organisations that I showed you before? All of them were earning over $500,000 when they first applied for this grant, and they were already all generating more than 10 jobs. So if you're slightly under that, you might not make a strong application at this point. So we recommend that you maybe look at other options and other grants, which we can talk about. We're talking about at the end of this webinar as well. And maybe as you grow and evolve, you can revisit the self-assessment and you can apply again in future rounds. Again, if you've got any questions as we go on the self-assessment or the process, feel free to pop them in the questions and then we'll get to them at the end in the Q&A section. Now, once you actually get recommended to proceed, you'll get a link that actually takes you through to the Westpac Foundation Grants portal. And this is just an example of what the portal looks like. If you've ever applied for a Westpac Foundation grant before, you might be familiar with this portal. And once you do sign in, you'll see your other grant applications there as well. And then once you sign in, you just need to click on and also then start a new social scale-up application. Okay, so assuming you've been recommended to proceed through the self-assessment process, you've logged into the grants portal, and now a whole range of questions will come up for you to answer. You actually don't need to wait to get to that point to see what questions are going to be asked in the application. On our website right now, we have the Social Scale Up Grant Guidelines. All of those guidelines are in a fantastic document which gives you the questions that will be asked. It mirrors the application exactly, and it also gives you, in a much more user-friendly format, a whole range of tips for each of those questions. So we're trying to give you what's in our mind of what we're trying to look for when we ask these questions. So I really strongly encourage you to download and print off the guidelines and really refer to those guidelines as you're completing the application. The tips, you will be able to still see them when you're applying, but you have to hover over and those tips will pop up as a pop-up box. But if you've got them beside you in this format, in the guideline format, I think you'll find that a little bit easier. So I just also recommend you read and try and understand those tips and hints. We have tried to make it easy for you to really get the gist of what we're actually asking. And there's not a huge amount of questions, so we really encourage you to really read the questions and really try and work out what we're trying to ask for. We have put word limits, again, because we really want you to try and be succinct and really create a strong grant submission. Our eligibility and funding criteria is also in there, and also some key definitions. So I think I've probably stressed how important those guidelines are. Okay, this is usually everyone's favourite slide, talking about how do we actually select. So last year, I think we had around, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was around 70 applications. And we shortlisted to 10 organisations, and then it came down to the 5 that actually got the grant. We hope through the self-assessment we'll probably get less applications this year, and we hope we'll get stronger organisations actually applying. And once we've got those organisations that have submit and do apply, again by the 5th of March, just reminding you of that date, we will actually go through an assessment process. And these are the selection criteria. And again, you're going to get a copy of this. So preferably just have a listen to me rather than write this down, because you'll get a copy after the webinar as well. Plus it's in the guidelines. So, as I've already mentioned, a robust business plan and a strategy for the next 3 years, including detailed financial forecasts, are a real imperative to have when you're applying for this grant. The 10th of May is going to be that date where we want that information to be locked in. If you are shortlisted, you will be asked for that detailed information. By the 5th of March, we want you to have. So if you're starting with that robust business plan and those 3-year financials, and you've already got them, filling out this application is a real breeze. And as I said, if you're shortlisted, they will then be asking you to send us all of that information by May. You don't need to send it in when you put in the application. So the financial records and having evidence that the social enterprise is generating at least 50% of your revenue from trading, but also that you're actually projecting to grow that 50% to what we've said is one of our benchmarks to be around 75% in the next 3 years. So we want to see that your social enterprise is moving to be sustainable. And for some social enterprises, particularly one that that we have funded in the early days in a remote region and in an Indigenous organisation in remote areas, they are so heavily reliant upon other grants and donations that they honestly can say, we will only be able to our costs are so high, we'll only ever be able to really honestly generate 50% of our revenue from trading, no matter what we do. We've looked at this from lots of different angles. That's okay. So I guess that's not the growing social enterprise in terms of the sustainability aspect that we're trying to fund and support, but that's still a valid model. There's nothing wrong with that, but we're looking to support those that are expected to grow. We've also, as you've seen, some of the benchmarks in the self-assessment. I'm getting all my S's confused in the self-assessment survey that we're asking for you to apply if you've already got a current annual gross income of $500,000. As I mentioned to you before, all of the recipients from last year were quite, $500,000 and above, and some were quite well above that. So we've sort of said, if you're $200,000-$300,000, that's fantastic. Maybe it might take you another couple of years before you should apply again to make a strong application. And I guess comparing your current and financial forecast, this is where a lot of people fell over last year, is that they said, okay, we're currently at $500,000, and in 3 years we're going to be at $600,000 as our gross income. Well, actually, we're giving you a grant of $300,000. So really, we are really looking for you to increase your gross income by at least $300,000, which is the value of the grant over the next 3 years. And it really doesn't make sense for us to invest in a social enterprise that is only going to generate another $100,000 over the next 3 years. So I don't want you to take that as, well, we need to be, for everyone to have, to make unrealistic projections here. Because really, at the end of the day, we would prefer your financial projections to be honest and to be realistic. The process that we go through once you submit, if you're shortlisted and submit that final documentation, supporting documentation, is that we give that to our risk and finance reviewers, and that panel goes through and really looks at the viability. I had one risk and finance reviewer say to me, Lisa, this model looks quite amazing. They're looking to increase their revenue by 14% every year. That's just, a super model really, because I'm looking at all of the benchmarks in the industry, and the equivalent model in the industry is only really increasing, and they're sophisticated, been around for 20 years, and this is a model that's been around for 3. They're looking to increase their revenue by only 3 to 4%, and they're the top of the tree in terms of this industry. How is this new social enterprise going to increase by 14% revenue every year? I just can't see that happening. So those financials that you submit in the supporting documentation are really important. And that's really why we're asking those questions of the $500,000 benchmark, the 75% revenue from trade, and that you're going to increase your revenue by $300,000. Again, hopefully you've got some questions on that, and I hope that makes sense. Okay, the next criteria obviously is around creating jobs and employment pathways for those that are experiencing disadvantage. So we are asking you to give us some information about the number and the types of jobs that you're going to create in your social enterprise. The internal jobs within your social enterprise and the external jobs that you expect to create at either 6-12 month mark. Again, we would prefer that you underestimate and over-deliver with these numbers. We want to know that they're realistic and they're conservative. They definitely carry more weight than overly optimistic and potentially unachievable targets. And we can't stress that enough. So again, we're looking for realistic, we're not looking at, and we're going to every organisation, if you look at those 10 organisations before, you've got some Indigenous organisations that are creating very few jobs in remote and rural communities versus another organisation that's going to create maybe 200 jobs over the next 3 years, because they're going to be based in 4 different capital cities around Australia, and they've got a proven track record and model. So it's not always going to be the number of jobs that we select. It's going to be how realistic those jobs are. Okay, we really want to see how, we ask some questions in the application about your workplace support model. We really want to know and understand, and one of the selection criteria is how well you support the individuals in your target groups on their journey to actually get job ready. And how do you assess them prior to providing support? Are they the right people coming in to the program? And whether you're still in contact with them after they've left the organisation, or, how are they tracking? Have they been able to manage to sustain their employment post the organisation? And I was talking to one of our organisations that we support yesterday, Street, and they call their program when organisations leave Street, it's called the Streets Ahead program. And they've got a formal process whereby they follow up their organisations, follow up their participants. So how do you do that? What's the best model that suits you? And we would love you to articulate that. And look, everybody provides this social support in different ways, and it really does depend on what your model is. Some people provide that support in-house, and others actually outsource it. So we really just want to understand what that is. But really, most importantly, how does that social support tailor to the needs of the individuals? Is it evidence-based? Has it been tried and tested? Ideally, it's been continuously improved. And ideally, you've got someone in your organisation who has responsibility for that element in the model. I guess a good way, I'll just pause here for a minute before I go on to the next criteria. One of the examples that I saw last year in an application was from an organisation that did get the grant, and they provided us with some organisation charts, some images and diagrams that actually wasn't just the text, but it actually kind of gave us a bit of a flavour. Now, I know the application only gives you room for words, but you could actually, if there's something on your website or a diagram or anything that you think could help us understand your model, how it generates income, how it employs people, how you're going to create that level of income and that number of jobs, then just feel free to make a note of it in the application form. Okay, so the next criteria is a strong management team and a strong board with relevant experience, and also that have the commercial expertise in the industry in which you're trading in. So, for example, the Toowoomba Clubhouse, Vanguard Laundry, one of the first things we were looking for was that they had someone on their team that had run a laundry before, because their founder hadn't run a laundry before. So that is one of the key things to be able to demonstrate that you've got the commercial expertise in the industry in which you're trading in, as well as an experienced board, and that your board is well governed. And again, it may not be perfect, but we really want to see that if you've got issues or identifying gaps in your management team or in your board, that you're moving in that direction to help fill those. I think this pretty much point goes without saying that we are looking to support organisations that have a strong commitment to measuring social impact. And this really It doesn't mean you have to have the $1 million research with a university all lined up to go ready for, at this point when you're applying for the grant. What it actually looks like is that you've identified what success is for your employees and your trainees. That you can give us some examples how people have been able to successfully transition into a job or improve their quality of life as a result of your support. And we want to understand what methodology you are using that's tailored to your organisation to measure the impact of the people in your target groups as a result of the social enterprise. So that's we want to understand the process and the methodology that you're using there. And I think most importantly, you actually have to have a need to grow and scale up the business. As I mentioned earlier, that example of an organisation that's only going to be really growing their business by 100,000 over the next 3 years, you probably actually don't need the grant because you're growing at a scale. You're already going to be growing at that level. You probably don't need the Westpac Foundation grant to achieve scale, the scale that you're sort of looking for. So why are you actually looking to scale? I think if you can really articulate this really clearly around the reasons why you want to scale, why it makes sense, why you need the funding to scale up these operations. It might mean that, you have been, you do this really well in Victoria, say, and you know that you've got relationships with people in Queensland and South Australia. And this grant will specifically target the scaling up of those 2 new locations. Or it might just mean that you want to expand to a new region, which is and I'm using Victorian examples here, but in Dandenong or Geelong. So if you can really articulate what it is that you want to help, why it is that you want to scale and why it is that you want to grow, and how many more people you'll be able to reach as a result, that would be really great. Obviously, we're wanting to see that you're planning to grow your trading revenue as well as the number of jobs. So are you able to generate enough sales and attract new customers in these areas, in these new regions? And how is that? What evidence are you going to provide us to sort of say, okay, well, South Australia, actually we're going to provide that evidence because, our parent company, our parent not-for-profit is already there, and this has been a huge demand. We've already tested it, we've already piloted it. Now we're actually going to move into that stage, for example. And obviously, we know with every scale up and every growth, that's why this grant exists. There's going to be so many risks and barriers, as well as those advantages for scaling up. We really want to see that you're really aware of what those risks are in your business. We want to see that you're going to be in a position to manage these risks because everyone's going to have issues that come up, whether they're planned or unplanned. And we're particularly interested in your financial risks. Cash flow issues are really important. Resourcing, staffing risks, reputation risks, operation risks. So if you've got a good approach to risk management, that will also help us, determine the benefit of you growing and scaling, and the likelihood that it will be sustainable. And obviously, will your plans lead to helping more individuals in our foundation target groups, or will it actually just help you earn more money? We'd ideally like to see that it would be both. In terms of what to put in your application for the need for funding, I've just got some examples here that other people have put in the past. It could be for wages for key roles such as a GM or a HR manager, financial controller or business development manager to help improve the business long-term financial sustainability. It could be to fund the costs of additional support program, a transition manager, someone that can help transition people out into the workforce, or a trainee or another trainee support manager to help take some of the load off the people who are already doing that role in your social enterprise. Or it actually could be to fund the expansion into new operations or new premises or new locations. So I know I spent a bit of time on this slide, but I really just wanted to go through those selection criteria in more detail. Okay, so as you can probably guess, we're really wanting to get a really clear and a compelling overview of your social enterprise. As I mentioned before, we want to get some realistic plans and projections. Really, if you can put in the worst case and the what ifs, I much preferred to the best case scenarios. Just remember that if you get shortlisted, our risk and finance panel are going to be looking at this, and we want them to be able to really understand what it is you do, what's the problem you're trying to address, and look at your financials in the best light. And we don't want them to think this is just pie in the sky, unrealistic idealism. Really important, and that's why we're doing the webinars. That's why we have the self-assessment. That's why we are open to talking to you. We want to invest in a long-term relationship. Please be open and frank about all of your risks and challenges. It's our intent to help you overcome these through our Changemaker and More Than Money program. Again, if you can just please, you'll be surprised how many people we get, how many acronyms and abbreviations and interpretations that we have to try and decipher. And again, if you could please help with that. And again, with your elevator pitch, just ask yourself, play it back to people just to make sure that it's really well and easy to understand in that elevator pitch. Please, we've got the word can, as I mentioned, the briefer the better. And often I find that it's easier in this process to actually write it out in long format in a Word document and then actually make it brief and summarise it. So hopefully it's probably the second or third version that you're actually putting into the application. So if you can draft your answers. Saying that, there is no perfect organisation, there's no perfect application. We want to know, and all of those 10 organisations, we've gone into the funding with risks, but we've actually known what those risks are, what those red flags are. Okay, I think I'll move on. This slide has, again, mentioned some of those key dates that I highlighted earlier and a lot more information about each of the stages that go from the 1st of February through to September. So I'm not going to read through those individually. You will get a copy of this and they are in the guidelines as well. As I said, it will take till September till the board meet. And then we'll do a formal announcement in November. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them up. The next steps, obviously, just to summarise, if you can please complete the self-assessment if you haven't already done so. As I mentioned, read the grant guidelines. We are going to provide some help for those organisations and people that are based in Adelaide, Brisbane or Perth, because we often don't know you or haven't developed a relationship with you. So we're holding a VC on February the 15th from 12 to 1 p.m. in our Westpac offices with a local Westpac contact. If you are based in other states, I suggest that you contact myself, and my email's at the end of this. At the end of the last slide, if you've got any questions or queries or you want to discuss your application one-on-one. Not to say that the other people in other states can't do that as well. It's just that we're putting this sort of extra layer in because it's probably easier to do that via VC rather than us going around to three or four different states. And our local contacts in those areas really want to start to develop the relationships with you and help you. But they're sort of our pseudo team members, if you like, in other states. So please watch some of those videos from our previous Social Scale Up grantees and have a look at some of the other community grant programs that we've got. As I mentioned, the Social Scale Up is only really one of a whole suite of opportunities. We have Westpac Foundation community grants and our Social Change Fellowship. There's a brief slide about them both. Our community grants will be open again in May. They're $10,000, and a lot of those 10 organisations that you saw earlier first got a grant through a community. Their first grant through us was a community grant, a $10,000 community grant. And we got to know them, we got lots of More Than Money support, and then we encouraged them to apply for the Social Scale Up grant down the track. We also have Alyssa Nightingale on the webinar today. She's only in listen only mode, but she runs the Social Change Fellowship. And you may have seen some information that there's been 9 Social Change Fellows that have just been announced in the last week. And those fellows and scholars are each receiving a grant of up to $50,000 for their own professional and personal development, to either travel, to undertake course, or to go and look at best practice in their field and develop themselves as a future leader in the social sector in Australia. Give you an example, Matthew Botel from Free 3D Hands was awarded a social change fellowship, as was Madeline Butcher from Little Dreams, and Laura Reid from Fighting Chance are just three of the 9 fabulous fellows that have just been announced. So we're heading into Q&A time, and I've got my colleague Sally McGeoch also able to talk to you today, and her and I are here to answer your questions. Obviously I've been talking and I haven't seen any questions yet, so Sally's been reading those questions as she goes. So I'm actually going to pass over to Sal to see if there's some questions that she could pop up and highlight, and feel free to come back to me at any time, Sal, as well.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. You can hear me okay, Lisa?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just can't click to the last slide.
No problem. So the first question's a very easy one. Where will we get access to the slides and presentations? So as Rob mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there'll be an email go out to everyone that's on the line or who's registered with a link to the video recording of the webinar and also these slides, plus a lot of the links that Lisa's referred to in the presentation. The next question is, if you operate more than one social enterprise, are you able to submit multiple applications? That's a really good question. So we do often get applications from largest not-for-profits that run multiple social enterprises as subsidiaries. So when you do apply, yes, submit multiple applications, but make sure you put the financials and the job targets in for that social enterprise entity, not the parent, and then obviously, you know, another application for the other social enterprise. Do keep in mind that when we do get through to the shortlisting phase, though, we'll need some of the financials for the parent entity as well, because we take a lot of that into account in that sort of risk and finance review stage. Lisa, jump in if you wanted to add anything to that answer. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Thanks.
Is the criteria of 50% social enterprise in the self-assessment to apply to the previous financial year, or is it the rate implied in the forward business plan? I think Lisa's pretty much addressed that in the presentation. So we are looking for your previous financials to have at least 50% of your income derived through trade, and then to be growing that to approximately 75%. If you've answered yes to everything else and there's, you know, you're maybe 49% or 48%, do get in touch and we can have a look at that, because, you know, we do have these benchmarks, but, you know, they're not hard and fast rules necessarily. We don't want to, you know, miss any fantastic applications based on a percent here or there. The next question is there any legal requirement on the structure of the social enterprise? So you'll see in our eligibility requirements, applicants must have DGR status. There is the possibility, obviously, if it's subsidiary, you'll be entering the ABN of the parent entity. And in some cases, there's an auspicing arrangement, but that is the kind of fundamental requirement for all of the grants for the Westpac Foundation, is you need to have DGR status 1 to be eligible to apply. The next question is, would you provide examples of how others have measured social impact? So I think what we found at the foundation, I mean, everyone records their own impact in different ways based on their mission. In terms of what we're looking for around employment outcomes, things like obviously number of jobs that have been created as a result of your enterprise, number of jobs that people have transitioned to as a result of your support or training program, we're interested in things like retention rates, transition rates, how long people have been employed for since they've left your social enterprise. Some organisations go quite deep with their analysis. I know the Vanguard Laundry are looking at things like the reduction in medication of their beneficiaries through being involved in the laundry because a lot of the employees there have mental health issues. So it's really up to you, but those sort of fundamental employment outcomes are really key. So the next question is if we need to be earning a minimum trading income of 500K to be eligible to apply. Yes, that is correct. Again, if it's sort of 480 or close and everything else is a yes, get in touch. But it's just really, we've come up with these benchmarks because you know, we've seen 2 rounds now of people apply for these grants, and they are the organisations that come out the strongest overall in terms of our goals for the social scale up is organisations that have that minimum trading, you've got minimum trading income, that's minimum revenue of 500K, not minimum trading income. Just correcting myself there. I'm just looking further down our question set here. Is the funding being sought for an overall social enterprise role? Do you need to supply financials for all of the roles plus the mother company? So in the application stage, we just want the financials for the social enterprise entity only. So that social enterprise, say it's a cleaning business that belongs to a larger not-for-profit, we want to see the income and the trading, so the revenue and the trading income for that particular social enterprise, not necessarily the parent entity. But then when we get deeper into the shortlisting stage, we will be looking for further financials, not just for the social enterprise, but we'll be looking at your parent entity as well. And I think that's the only questions that we've got there at the moment. Does anyone want to pop in any more while we've got a few minutes remaining? And we can answer those, or you know, we're very happy to answer further emails, further questions via email. Okay, another one's come through. And if you feel free to drop off the webinar too if you feel like you've had your question answered. To sustain. Okay, so I'll just read out this question. Is consideration taken into account around the level of challenges clients have and their ability to sustain employment? Someone with a highly dysfunctional background cannot access employment pathways with someone who has less difficult circumstances. That's a great question too, and we do actually, we're interested in sort of what percentage of people coming into your programs have been employed before, and in our final, and that kind of information we look for, you can definitely mention that in your application, but we'll go a bit deeper into that in the shortlisting stage. And if we had 2 organisations and one organisation had sort of, you know, 80% of their target group had never had a job before, and they were getting fantastic results in terms of transitioning those people into full-time employment, but say they only had 10 employment outcomes compared to an organisation that might have had 30, but those people had predominantly been employed before. We definitely take that sort of thing into account because we are looking for how deep the impact is that you're creating. So that's a really great question, and it's definitely worth popping some information in about where your target group's coming from in terms of their employment history in your application. I've got another question here. If a role is being bought to support more than one social enterprise, how would we display the financials? So we had a question before, can we apply for 2 social enterprises under one parent? Much cleaner if you do it as 2 separate applications, so we can see those 2 separate sets of financials. If you're coming across issues with your login because it's the same email or any of those kinds of technical issues because you're putting in multiple applications, do get in touch with us and we'll work through that with you. Does the social enterprise have to be a Westpac customer? Absolutely, absolutely not. So for those that aren't aware, on the webinar, the foundation is independent to the Westpac group. So, you know, as Lisa mentioned, we started 139 years ago. We exist on the generosity of our founder, and we do have support from the foundation, sorry, from the group, and consider them to be a key supporter, but by no means do applicants need to be customers. Once we do have grantees, we're obviously able to offer them a whole range of support and access to really favourable loans and that sort of support down the track, but that is by no means a requirement for applying for a grant. Okay. Is there any more info you can provide around auspice applications? Our foundation has DGR status, but partner with the not-for-profit social enterprises who do not have DGR. So I think for that person, if you could just get in touch with us directly, that's probably something we'll need to take offline with you. The groups identified as priority groups could be categorized as deserving poor. Many people in these categories have behavioural issues which make them undeserving, such as sex offenders, drug users. Does this have to have a bearing on the application process? Again, if you can't make a direct connection with the target groups that we list in our criteria there, do get in touch. You know, they do kind of, we do rework them from time to time to make sure that we are capturing those that need it most in terms of disadvantaged groups across Australia. But if you're finding that you're not fitting perfectly into one of those groups, we can maybe talk to you about how to submit something there. I mean, sometimes the mental health category can be a good one for obviously people that are long-term unemployed, because they obviously experience you know, a lot of mental health issues as a result of being out of the workforce. But yeah, please just get in touch if you're not quite sure about your target group, and we can help and advise you there. Okay, well, that's the end of the questions that I have so far. I'll just throw to Lisa for a moment. Lisa, is there anything else that you wanted to add based on the Q&A there?
Fantastic, Sally. Great answers to all of those questions. As we've just put our last slide up there, which is the Westpac Foundation email for any general inquiries or technical issues with the portal when applying. But if you're recommended to proceed and you've got a specific inquiry about your application, my email is up on the screen, and we've put some other links in there to the Davidson Institute, which also runs a whole range of other not-for-profit webinars, which are free to access. We've got a new innovation toolkit and some great resources on the Davidson Institute, and also a link to the Westpac Family of Giving, as I mentioned, or some of those other funding opportunities through our partner foundations, St George Foundation, Bank SA, Bank of Melbourne Neighbourhood Fund as well. So feel free to have a look at those opportunities. Thanks very much for joining us today. I really look forward to reading your applications, and I hope this has helped you put in a strong application or helped you decide to look for another opportunity within the Westpac group. Thank you.